What's up, tribe? Thank you for being here and welcome to my channel. Today's post is titled Anguish, and as it's a dialogue between Matias and his higher self, I'll be referring to Matias as me and to his higher self as I am. Me. Speaking of the importance of going inward, when I immerse myself in myself, I find only one great emotion that encompasses my entire inner being, perhaps the one that most defines my inner world, enveloping my essence, and that is anguish. Defining what you feel is strange because it comes from many emotions, which I cannot relate to each other. Sometimes it invades my whole being, causing me to fall into a crushing depression that can last a day or a week. I am. What do you feel during that time? Me. As if I was short of breath. I can't move my body, and everything loses meaning. It becomes cloudy. Nothing is clear. It is like looking outside without seeing what is there. With a lost look, desire is lost in all senses. The sensation is like plunging into pain without logic, without reason. Sometimes I try to understand the origin, and yet there is none. What is anguish? I am. First of all, angustia comes from the Indo-European word ang, which means tight. Etymologically, it describes the fact that more than one being is tied and pressed against the others, becoming controlled, narrow. Imagine then sadness, melancholy, anger, rage, love, euphoria, pleasure, joy, all of them that move through your body, being trapped, tied by a rope, and pressed one against the other. None can move. They just remain still, static. If the energy does not move, everything that mobilized you before ends in silence, generating a sensation of existential emptiness. Because existence is movement, thus anguish surrounds the essence, as it is the last negative emotion that you can find on the verge of neutrality. Me. In other words, anguish, unlike melancholy and sadness, does not have a reason for being, does not have an object of reference, but is the sensation that occurs when all the others are united to the limit of existence, to return to the center. Thus explains why people live an anguishing non-existence, nonsense, an anguishing nonsense that we cannot relate to anything. When we get closer to the truth of our being, it is as if nothing has meaning, not love, not struggle, not purpose, not sharing, nothing. Everything becomes irrelevant, and in a second you can feel all the emotions in your life without leaving one outside. But they all have the same color, the same aroma, the anguish. I am. Do you know the astronaut syndrome? Me, which one? I am. Solipsism. It comes from the Latin solos, to be alone, and ipus, oneself. The syndrome speaks of a person who distances himself so much from the reality in which he lives that he has to believe that nothing else exists than oneself, that everything you see exists only in the mind. Astronauts, cosmonauts are the ones who most present this psychological pathology because when seeing the earth from outside, being able to feel the empty space around them and live the experience that all things they know are only in a small sphere, they carry for the person to consider that perhaps nothing exists, that everything is a dream, because where he lives, there's no time or space. This envelops the person in an anguishing depression of unmanageable loneliness, which distances him from other individuals, from normal life on earth, making them lonely, hermits. Me. It sounds like what we've talked about going inward to the mind, which is only one. I am, exactly. Solipsism is experienced by those who go very far into space, or by those who go very close within the soul, as above, so below. The law of correspondence will remind us that going to the moon or Mars brings us the same sensations as going to our heart, for in both directions we approach the totality, where time and space lose meaning, and therefore everything that inhabits them will also lose you. Me. There is no longer logic, because you enter illogic. There is no reference point, only I and my perception of things exist. I am. Anguish is the last emotion that is felt from the human world when touching the great black hole of the essence of the I am. Me. But when we say that something causes us anguish, like seeing hunger in the world, or a war, or something that produces disgust, people use anguish to refer to an indefinite state of discomfort, sadness. I am. That's something else. It's not anguish. Anguish is like the thin layer that separates the whirling chaos of the hurricane with the gentle stillness of the eye of the storm. Anguish has no direction. It has no purpose. It has no logic. It has no object on which to project itself. A war does not produce anguish. Anguish can only be experienced by those who have survived the war, who, without already thinking about the war, cannot look to the future or the past. They cannot perceive a specific emotion, since they have lost all of them. Whoever watches a war or something disgusting only feels disgust, sadness, anger, discomfort, but not anguish. Anguish does not have a focus of attention. Me. And how would you define the anguish caused by remembering the past? I am. Melancholy, from the Greek melas, black, and cholis, bile. It represents that visceral emotion that makes you see everything black, that prevents you from seeing ahead, and you can only feel inside. Melancholy is related to the emotions linked to the ancestral and visceral, to the bonds that still weigh because you have not been able to get rid of them, so they returned in the form of vomit, something unprocessed, unremarkable. Me. In 2010, it was the first time I came to Egypt. I needed to be here. I wanted with all my might. My guides warned me not to come. They said that I was not prepared to face the current reality. But I did not follow his advice and came. I cried every day, and it was one of the worst trips of my life. I had a fever, diarrhea, vomiting. Every place I went awakened pain in me, memories. I thought that the past gave me anguish, but now I understand that no, it was melancholy, sadness. For years, through my memories, I felt these emotions in me. That idea of old time past was better. I realized that I could not digest my current reality. I could not process in my stomach what my eyes saw today because what I experienced no longer existed. Melancholy made me sick from a very young age, leading me to constant emotional depressions. Every person I remembered, country I felt, they all had something that I had not finished digesting yet. Black bile. But every so often, when I connected with the universe, with interdimensional memory, the emotion was different. There was nothing. There was no sensations. There was no one to cry for. I was trying to search in other dimensions for the same things I could feel here, longing for someone, loving someone who had had to leave, feeling anger for some enemy from another dimension, or attachment to some entity. And yet, the closer I got to the memory of the cosmos, the fewer emotions I felt, the fewer beings existed there to be longed for. There was no attachment, there was no emotion, and the sensation stopped being melancholic because there was nothing to process. Faces, kisses, caresses, laughter, nothing. I only felt pulses, and all of them were leading me. I am the anguish, me, the anguish. There it was. The moment I remembered that I was everything, that everything was me. I am that I am, he said. I said to myself. It resounded in the universal mind, and I felt very alone. I am solipsism. Me, without feeling any emotion. I could perceive that nothing existed but me and my thoughts. I could feel at that moment the great universal oxymoron, the full emptiness, where all are one and one is millions. And there I felt the greatest anguish of all, knowing that I was everyone, that nothing else existed. Suddenly, I even felt fear, but immediately vanished in the centrifugal force of anguish. Nothing made sense, as my mind had given it to him. I am. The universe is a polarity that does not arise from two aspects, but from oneself. As you have said, the universe is an oxymoron, born from the Greek words oxys, sharp, and moron, blunt. Therefore, an absurd concept that in itself contains dualities, deafening silence, eternal instant, which reminds you of the feeling of the Ouroboros, something without purpose, without end, in which its very duality is a mere perspective from unity. If emotions are pulses of positive and negative energy that oscillate in the polarized cosmos, then the way to get to the center and unity of things is only through an emotion without purpose. What is the universal oxymoron par excellence? Me, an anguishing love? I am. When the universe expands, you can only feel love because love is the emotion that connects everything, that manifests creation towards the external, the positive. But when the separate creation seeks to return to the center, unifying things, it goes the other way, towards the integration of the expanded, looking for the interior in the form of a negative. Thus, he uses depression, anxiety, to find the center. Me. So the anguish that is felt on the spiritual path is a way of knowing that we are unifying all things to find the center of the cosmos, right? I am. And in that instant, you see the eye of the hurricane, peace, fullness, harmony, love. The culmination of anguish is that instant in which you recognize, if nothing makes sense, then I have given it meaning to me. Then the only solution for me is to give it a new meaning again. Me. And I become the creator. I am. As in vibration waves. For a wave to advance and expand, it needs moments of low and high frequency in which the waves contract or distract, when curves, valleys, and hills you call concave positions and convex. The concave position of a wave, uphill, implies a positive point of expansion, while the convex position, downward valley, implies a negative depression. The movement of light at high speed is due precisely to this position. If you want to propel the light through a straight cable, you will need a great initial impulse force to get it to the other end. Otherwise, it will lose clean and jerk, stopping midway. But in a spiral cable, the light, its particles, will take up the clean and jerk on each new descent, propelling the next one, increasing its strength instead of losing it. Now think, then, that depression has an overwhelming logic to help the expansion of light. Me, sure. In other words, every process of internal crisis, of a dark night of the soul, of anguish, is nothing more than the convex curve of the universe pushing itself to create. That is why many artists are depressive, because that way they manage to find more wealth in the inner world. I am in a world of external productivity, factories, fields, hard work. Anguish and sadness are seen as weaknesses, a loss of strength, useless for work. This has classified them as mental pathologies and has made everyone try to avoid denying them. Fear of these emotions appears, and this wears out the person who does not dare to live his inner world in depression, cannot find his truth. The fear of falling into that uselessness has turned this process into something lasting and meaningless, a trap for the mind. But if you know what it exists for, then it becomes useful. Me, well, anguish is the other face of love, two emotions that make up the unique force of creation, the full void. I am. The next time you see anguish envelop you, do not escape from it. Just remember that it is that strange sensation that occurs in your organs when the descent on a roller coaster approaches. But you know well that after the descent, there is no more to climb, that at the end of the tunnel, there is always the light. Because without the darkness that surrounds you, you could never identify it to shine. Me, when I feel the anguish of nonsense, I will immerse myself in it with the desire to find myself, with the desire to wake up. It is difficult to submerge, I know, like jumping into a lake of cold water. But in its piercing coldness, it is where I find the activation of my expansive inner heat, the pulse that is activated, the energy that is exalted. Anguish then ceases to be my prison, to become my catapult towards love. I am. The starry sky that you see above you is due to the dark night, in the same way that the brightness of your soul is visible by the darkness that lives in you. Me, I am the void in fullness.